Why do we struggle? Murdo MacDonald-Bayne. Peace I leave to you, my peace I give to you, I give it not as the world gives its peace. Let not your hearts be disquieted or timid. John 14:27. When we begin to discern the activities of the mind, we find that there is a continuous struggle with opposites, which means only one thing: frustration. With most, there is a continuous struggle through reactions to conditions and circumstances that surround them. This is common in all shades of life: the rich, the poor, the educated and the uneducated, the great and the small. We have the idea of health but struggle with ill health. We have the idea of plenty but struggle with lack. We hold the idea of success while we struggle with failure. We hold the idea of freedom while we struggle with our conditioning. We hold the idea of good while we struggle with evil. While this conflict goes on, we create a greater burden. When one struggle is over, another begins. Our minds are filled with the effects of our struggle and therefore are incapable of true direction. How can this turmoil come to an end? That is the question. But the answer does not come because we are caught up in the struggle. When we rebel against anything, we struggle, do we not? So we react to our conditioning because we are conditioned. Nothing external to us has any power of its own. So the trouble lies within ourselves. We have lost our God-given power of dominion. On the other hand, if we understood the cause, we would not rebel but work from within to remove the cause. The cause can only be removed when we understand ourselves, our cravings, our desires, our antagonisms, our greed, our jealousies, etc., etc., and how they come about. The presence is always present and there is no such thing as lack, no evil or ill health, hate and the like, in the presence, and the presence is the only reality, and all there is. Then how do these things come into being? When this is known, struggle ceases. The problem is then ourselves. But how can we dispense with this self that is the cause of all this misery? We can only do this by seeing how false the self is, with all its make-up, which is illusionary. It is the illusion of the self that must be dissolved through deep discernment of what it is. When this is accomplished, the self dissolves away and we learn the art of pure action from within, which sets in action ways and means without struggle, knowing that there is no opposing force, no other power, therefore the law fulfills itself according to our understanding. Pure action alone brings results without struggle, while reaction to things external is always a degree of misunderstanding. When we discover that we are always fighting reactions without understanding what they are, we will begin to wake up to what we are doing, otherwise we hold on to them. This happens whether they are pleasurable or painful. We generally accept the pleasant and deny the unpleasant. There is very little difference between the one who is seeking pleasure through God and the one who is seeking pleasure through sensate desires. Are they not both seeking pleasure through different planes of consciousness? The one seeks gratification through God, and the other seeks gratification through sensate things. The so-called spiritual person says, "I do not like theaters, cinemas, physical adornment, etc., and follows his ideal. He denies the worldly pleasures and follows his ideal that gives him pleasure." But the so-called spiritual man is also seeking pleasure, as does the man who seeks pleasure through the sensate things. Both are stupid because they are the cause of struggle and misery, not only within but without. While the one pursues the materialistic struggle, the other follows his belief, a struggle between good and evil and other beliefs. To him terms become very important. Your God and my God, your ceremonies and my ceremonies. I am a Christian, you are a Jew, I am a Mohammedan and you are an infidel. Just as one creates havoc in the world, so does the other. In fact, the so-called spiritual man does more harm. It is easier to deal with the sensate desires in which one is pursuing pleasure, than one who is pursuing pleasure through ideation. The latter is much more dangerous, because he is pursuing his pleasure through his ideas that divide men more than things divide men. The left and the right are pursuing ideas, not things. If they were pursuing things, it would be much easier to come to terms. It is because his ideas are more important than things, and his belief is superior to yours and so on, that he lives in separation. the system becomes more important than the distribution of things. It is not things that are dividing men but ideas. There is sufficient scientific skill in the world to produce food and things for everybody. But the ideas of nationalities such as the English, the American, the Chinese, the Russians, and the many different racial antagonisms are preventing man from making plans for world distribution. Therefore the struggle and misery in the world is increased. When I begin to understand the material, I can proceed step by step to the deeper things. There I can find out what is real and what is false. But when I assume I am different because of my nationality, because of my belief, I will dwell in the illusion of separation which brings struggle and misery into the world. It is only when I come to that point where I can find out the significance of life, what it really means to love my neighbor as myself, and not a dictionary meaning, not a theological or a philosophical meaning for me to follow. When we come to that point, we can discuss the dreams of our ideals with goodwill. Therefore the understanding of what is true and what is false gives freedom and therefore happiness. It is only when we reach the source of our creativeness that we can sleep at night undisturbed by our success or failure, our pleasures or pains, by our differences, etc. We will sleep peacefully understanding the law of creation, and while we sleep the Lord is preparing the way. The higher intelligence will be active in our affairs. At first you will perhaps not find immediate results, but to be assured that the presence is always immediately present is sufficient. One must be careful not to make the mind unstable by the conflict of opposites. "Thy faith hath made thee whole," the Master said. It is this understanding faith that you must have, then the infinite life will be given free expression. When you understand that it is the Father who is ever working in you, you will know that results are assured. "Whatsoever I see the Father doing, so I do in like manner." If you can understand this, then there is pure action, which is creative. It is difficult for the one who is conditioned to discern the difference between pure action and reaction. We must understand that all things external are relative, and what is relative has no power of its own except the power we give to it. Remember that struggling brings frustration and fear. When we fear, our faith is on the same yardstick. We measure them both by our success and failures, so we fail to see the faith that the Master meant, which was the Father within us. We create ignorantly in fear and faith. What we think in fear and think in faith we equally produce, because we live in opposites. So there is continual struggle with opposites. When we are ignorant of the truth of our being, we hang on the pendulum of both fear and faith. We swing backwards and forwards according to our reactions. But when we know our oneness, our being, we see that these impostors are but reactions to our feelings, our state of mind. Therefore we understand the cause of our struggle, and our struggle ceases. Within the presence, the life, there is everything. Therefore the presence, the life creates by becoming the things it makes. I am the life. When you have seen me, you have seen the Father. This is not merely an idea, but an experience we have when we are being and not becoming. The greatest amongst you is the servant of all. When the Master said this to his disciples, he had been explaining the law. The servant was the presence that knows all things, and is the creativeness in man. You will see that this creativeness can only come into being when you love your neighbor as yourself, for the creativeness of the presence is in your neighbor too. If we condition ourselves by hate, by jealousy, by fear, etc., we will express our conditioning. The great truth should be our experience, as it was with the Master. I and the Father are one. It made him the greatest figure of all time, and it can do the same for us. He told us that the things he did, greater things would we do if we would but believe, understand. The transforming power is within all of us. It transforms our thinking. Our thoughts are turned into projectiles of love, our faith moving mountains. As we discern all that hinders the presence in us, we will give up the struggle. Then the creative power of love will create that which is acceptable to him who created us in his own image and likeness. Then you will be the Son of God, Son of Man. John 18:37. So you are king, said Pilate. You? Certainly, said Jesus, I am a king. This is why I was born, this is why I came into the world, to bear testimony to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice. Benediction. O Son of Man, awaken to the presence that is eternal and ever present within you. Then, O Son of Man, there will be no more struggle, for love shall fill your heart. The Son of Man becomes the Son of God when he loves his neighbor as himself. The divine design within is waiting to express itself when you see the false you alone have created. Then you will be the Son of God, O Son of Man. My peace and my love remain with you. Yours very sincerely, Murdo MacDonald-Bayne.